Hello, class. I just wanted you to know how much I enjoyed our Twitter chat on Monday. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed me to learn a lot about Twitter, to even learn a little about Storify, and to decide that I would rather use Hootsuite over TweetDeck. So let's talk about a little bit about Twitter. I've had a Twitter account for forever. I think if you look at my tweets, it's probably been a year, maybe even more. But I probably do about 5 tweets a year, and I'm just not really a tweeter. I'm not really a tweeter. But I decided that this year I was going to at least learn how to do it and start to participate some. What I have the students in my other class doing is following a hashtag. And so, like some people chose hashtag cyberbullying, hashtag idtech, hashtag, I think there's a hashtag idtech chat, just to follow a professional community on Twitter as opposed to joining a mailing list or getting in a forum. And so I'm also following some hashtags. I'm following hashtag DigPage, and I should have put a slide of some of these so that you would know, but I didn't. I just thought about that as I started talking. But I think that I'm beginning to see how Twitter can be useful. Not for everything, but for some things. And I've never used Storify before. So the only thing that I've done now is pull in tweets from the hashtag. And when I sent out email to each of you this morning and asking you to do a critical analysis of your participation in the tweet chat and to decide how you could not just increase your participation, but improve it in terms of the quality of the input that you provide to the chat. But anyway, so what I did is when I sent you that email, for some of you, I actually sent you a Storify of your tweets, but I used the minimal capability of Storify. All I did was pull in the tweets that belong to you. I didn't write a story around them. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Andrew does with his Storify of our tweet chat. He's much more experienced with this than I am. And I have to thank Andrew, Sloan, and Michelle just for being very active yesterday and for entertaining a whole lot of questions about how Twitter works and different protocols to make the chat more effective. At least for me, I feel much smarter today than I was yesterday. Now, TweetDeck and Hootsuite are what are they? They are tools that allow you to manage your Twitter accounts, your social media accounts in one place. Anyway, you should look them up. And so instead of going to Twitter to look at your chats, I started using TweetDeck, but when I found out it didn't have a iOS an app for my iPad, I moved to Hootsuite, and Hootsuite has a lot more functions. For example, I don't know, I might have done this on TweetDeck. Anyway, but both of them will allow you to schedule your tweets. So the questions that I had for the chat, I scheduled them to go out at 12:01, 12:02, 12:03, 12:04, up to 12:07. I probably could have scheduled them all to go out at 12:01, but I was sort of didn't know what I was doing. But anyway, so that's all I want to say, and I'm looking forward to getting your evaluations. I've gotten back one already, and I'm telling you, the comments they were right on target, and I conclude that that you all know what quality participation is. Each one of you know what that is, not just numbers of participation, because the list that this particular student sent me was a list that I would have made myself if I had made the list instead of asking you all to make the list. So I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody has to say about their participation. We're all here to learn. And I think what we're going to learn is that Twitter doesn't work for everything, but there are some things that it can help us to do and it can be effective in doing that. And so that's where we want to be. I'm not sure we're going to do Twitter for the entire semester. We're probably going to mix it up a little bit. One thing that I thought as I looked at some of your responses, well, I thought if all you're going to do is just answer the question, I could just give a quiz. So we come to Twitter for something other than you to just answer the question. And that's what we're looking at, that critical analysis for you to do. So maybe at some point in the semester we will have a quiz, but this is not what the Twitter is for. I mean, at least not directly. And just as soon as I say that, now let's go to the questions. Okay, the first question was, if we stop asking the question, is online as good as face to face? What questions should we ask when it comes to online learning? As I told you, the questions that I was going to put forth were not questions that you had to use the book to look up the answer to, but our discussions are based around some chapter readings. And for this week, you were supposed to read the first chapter of Palaf and Pratt, then the first three chapters of Major. And this question basically comes, I thought of it as I was reading the Palaf and Pratt chapter 1. I think the last section of that first chapter, they talk about effectiveness and how we've spent so much time doing that. Which one is better, or is online as good as face to face? And so I really thought that you guys came up with some good questions that we should be answering. I was particularly, I don't want to say intrigued, maybe pleased to see that people. I mean, like one of the comments was we can start focusing on the real questions that affect learning. I think somebody said about assessment, and I think that's a very important comment to make because what online learning does is it allows us to look afresh at questions that we were looking at in a face-to-face environment and maybe get a new perspective on them and come up with a rich answer. So I definitely appreciated your responses to that question. How would you reconcile the different needs, issues, administrators and faculty when making online decisions? The answers to this question went a lot of different ways. Some of them expected, some of them unexpected. But the idea for this question came from a page in the Palaf and Pratt book that I thought was a very important page. If you haven't read this, I suggest that you go back and read it. I think it's near the end of chapter 1, but it's emerging issues for both faculty and administrators. And they have a great table. And in this table, what they have are some of the concerns with online distance learning and how the faculty looks at those concerns and how administrators looks at those concerns. And I just thought it was compelling to me the differences in perspectives that administrators and faculty have. So if you haven't read that section of the book, I encourage you to go back and do it. I just took a clip from it there for this slide, but that's it. How did the three class meetings, including the IT Research Day you had during your first year in the DOC program, influence your experience in the online parts of this course? Now, this question was probably not fair to Crystal since she didn't participate in the first year. But I think that she tried to answer this question. I don't know if she did or not. I can't remember. But I was looking to see what you were going to say to this, Crystal, because I knew that it didn't apply. But anyway, very, very interesting. And I think the thing that I find most interesting about this is that a lot of times we always think that the community has to be built in the class. And in some cases, the community can be built outside the class. When I was a doc student, and I was a full-time doc student, we had that discussion on the tweet too, which I thought was a very interesting discussion. But when I was a doc student, my first year, I worked on a research project with one of the faculty. She was in library media, so she was teaching two classes of library students. And I know we were using WebCT, so basically I'm dating myself as being very, very old, but hey, that's life. And I remember there were two classes. The students were taking two classes. And the thing that became very, very clear is that you didn't have to do the same thing in both classes. Since these students were together in those two classes, there were some synergies that you got from it being the same students. And I think those are the same synergies that we get from you guys being in a cohort. It makes it a little different for somebody like Crystal, so we have to build mechanisms for her to feel involved. But in, from my perspective, not every online class has to provide the same type of interpersonal relationship building. That's just me. You can have a whole different opinion of that, and I'm sure it's going to come up as we continue to read. And I think when we wrote a paper on this back in the day, and I think the idea is that the students need to have these experiences, but those experiences don't have to necessarily be in the classroom. So some of those you guys have built outside in your Facebook environment. And some of the collaborations you would do even if we didn't ask you to do them, just because that's the way that you work. And so, but we helped you to build that by doing that. And I think that alternative residency that we did in AIL 691, those were actually good ideas for us because it help to bring our students together and to sort of allow us even to get to know them better. But anyway, that class, I mean, this question came from reading the first 2 chapters of Dr. Major's book. And then, because there was so much in Dr. Major's book, and I think this was Dr. Major's book, maybe this was the Paloff and Pratt book, or maybe it was both of them. What considerations do you think you'd make when designing K-12 online instruction that differ from considerations you make when designing higher ed online instruction? Now, this was the Paloff and Pratt book, and I think the first thing that came up for most of you is the same thing that came up in the textbook, and that was the notion that the access issue was probably a more prominent issue in K-12 than it was in higher ed. So either you read that and you knew that, or you just knew that, and the way you think is the same way the authors in the text thought. Excuse me. You have one day to prepare 10 members of your faculty to teach online. Just teach, not develop. What do you include in your training? And you got to pick, excuse me, K-12 or higher ed. I can still remember Andrew's response to this question, which I thought was fascinating, so I appreciate that. The idea behind this question was the first few chapters of Dr. Majors' book had a lot of information in there about what it means for faculty to teach online. And what I wanted in this question was to get some sense of what you thought was most important. And I found it very interesting that most people mentioned the technology, that teachers have to be able to master the technology if they're going to teach online. I'm not sure I agree with that fully. I think they have to know a lot of it, but I don't think, and this is not what Sloan said, so I don't want to put words in her mouth to say that she was the one who said this, but I don't think you have to know everything about Google Classroom in order to teach a class in Google Classroom. I think that what you do is you key in on a few features. I don't know what those features are because I don't know Google Classroom, but you do, and you work with those. And as you begin to learn more, you use more. So probably one day is not enough time to do it, but that's what I was trying to get you to think about. I don't know I don't know what I thought the answer was going to be, but I was surprised that most of the answers were learn the technology. But I guess that is important if you're going to teach online. If you can't log in, you can't do the work. I think there were some other things that came up, but I think the first thing that came up from multiple people was the technology, which I found very, very interesting. Not right or wrong, just interesting. Um, and then the last question. The way the major book is designed, it's not an edited book, but she has perspectives from a lot of different scholars talking about different aspects of online learning. I was surprised and a bit disappointed that more of you didn't answer this question. Now, if I do this straight from memory, only one person answered it, and that was Carla, so we know who that is. And Carla read the book before she got into class. So if you haven't taken some time to read those first 3 chapters of the major book, I think that you will enjoy them. It talks about teaching online as change, and change is difficult for all of us. And there are theories that deal with change, and we're going to look at some of those theories. No, we aren't. We aren't going to look at those theories in AIL 601. They're going to look at some of those theories. That's one of the changes that I made to 601. We're going to look at some change theories as well. So anyway, like I said, I was sort of disappointed that not more people didn't answer this question. In general, if there are 6 questions, I need you to answer 6 questions. I need you to respond to 6 questions. And while it may not be the case, the conclusion that I drew is that people had not read the book. Now, that does not have to be a correct conclusion, but that was the conclusion that I drew when people didn't answer this question. Anyway, that's it. I just wanted to go over those questions with you and to just reiterate how much I enjoyed the imperfect tweet chat, and look forward to trying it a couple more times. Not sure if this is something we should do the entire semester, but definitely want to try it a couple of more times. We have a scheduled synchronous session. What I'd like to do instead of us meeting in Zoom is to try a fast tweet for that day to see how that works since we're doing. And I'm calling it a fast tweet. That might not be the right word, but it's a synchronous tweet where we're all on Twitter at the same time and we're engaging that way. So I think we're scheduled for September the 23rd at 9 o'clock. That could be the wrong time, so look at the schedule. So let's plan to do that on Twitter. It's an optional session, but I would really like it if you're interested in learning more about Twitter, if it has gotten your interest, or if you didn't learn enough about it. Well, you will have played with it some more by then. Anyway, the more you use it, the more you'll learn. So that's it for me, and I look forward to seeing your Google Docs tonight and engaging in our next Twitter chat on Monday and receiving your critical analysis and your actions or whatever it is that you think you might do differently next week to improve your participation in the coming Twitter chat. So, thank you all for being good sports about this and being willing to learn together. This is Dr. Benson, and I'm closing out.